Alright guys, today we are going to go over a 50-100 stream that I'm about to play at Hustler Casino in about 1 hour, so time to get on the road. But real quick, I wanted to let you guys know that this upcoming Sunday, I will be playing 2550 at Resorts World with none other than Rampage Poker. He and I will be hosting a game together. I think we'll likely even get 2 tables going, so if you guys are interested in jumping into some WSOP cash game action, hit me up on Instagram or Rampage, either one of us, and yeah, we'll try to organize these games at Resorts World starting around 3 o'clock this Sunday. Let me know. But that's enough gibberish. Let's get into today's video, heading to the Hustler right now. Alright guys, as mentioned, we are playing 25-50-100 today, and in the first interesting hand, the $200 straddle is on, and I look down at pocket aces. Always a nice start to the session with the best possible starting hand in Hold'em. I open it up to 500 and get called by the legend Jungle Man on the button, as well as Henry in the third blind. So 3 of us go to a flop, which is pretty good for pocket aces, as will often be the case. 8-5-3 rainbow. So unless my opponent's flopped a set, we most likely still have the best hand. Henry checks and I continue with a bet of $1,100. A little bit dicey betting one pair on a board like this and facing a lot of aggression, but hopefully that doesn't happen. Unfortunately for my stress levels, Jungle Man raises the flop right away. He makes it 4,200 to go. This looks pretty strong, especially considering that Henry is left to act behind him. But when Henry gets out of the way, I've got aces, can't be folding just yet, especially against someone like Jungle Man who's more than capable of having some tricks up his sleeve. So I make the call, and we see the deuce of hearts on the turn. Shouldn't change much unless he was raising the flop with a hand like 6-4 suited, which would be an open ender, and he certainly could have that hand. I check it over to him. This time he checks it back though, so that makes me feel a lot better about my pocket aces. I suspect with a hand like 2 pair or a straight, he certainly would continue betting. River comes a 7 of hearts, again, not a great card for me. And even though I do think I have the best hand, most likely, betting here doesn't make a ton of sense, at least in my opinion. He could easily take advantage of that and raise me off my hand with something worse. And who knows, maybe he'll value bet a hand that I'm ahead of. So I check it over to him once more. Keep all options open for Jungle Man, but he decides to check it back with his flopped bottom pair. Unfortunately, that is not good enough to beat the aces, and we end up winning the first hand of the night. Now this next hand is a little bit off the rails. We're going to go from a very solid pocket aces to something quite the opposite, and frankly a little bit embarrassing for me, but here we go. In this hand we are playing the stand-up game, meaning you have to win a hand to earn one of those yellow buttons. If you don't win a hand and you're the last one without one of those buttons, you owe everyone else at the table $300 each, which in this instance was around either $2,100 or $2,400. Can't remember how many players were at the table at this hand, but it's down to me and Clue. We are the only 2 left without a button, meaning whoever wins a pot first is off the hook, and the other guy is going to have to pay everyone else some money. So the straddle is on. Mike X opens to $600 on the button, and then Clue re-raises from the big blind, makes it $2,400 to go. I am in the straddle with 9-7 suited, and honestly, all options seem not great. Folding a hand like 9-7 suited, when all we got to do is beat Clue to avoid paying the penalty, that doesn't seem very fun. Cold calling a re-raise and being out of position, that's never ideal either. And then re-raising with 9 high after all this aggression ahead of me, well, that can't go super well, at least not all the time, right? So I end up deciding to cold call, probably really bad if I'm being honest, but against these 2 opponents that I'm in the hand with, I'm happy to gamble it up and give some questionable action, if you will. So I cold call the re-raise, put in the 2,200 additional from the straddle. Now it's back to Mike, and he's got himself ace king, certainly good enough to raise once again, especially once I cold call. And he agrees because he kicks it up to $10,000. Now it's back on Clue, who was getting a little out of line with Queen Jack. He lets it go, but when it's back to me, I am not going to be letting it go. I've already played this hand quite poorly. What's another major mistake? So I call once again out of position. 10,000 in the pot with 9 high.
22,625 in the middle. Ace king against 9-7 suited. And we have an action flop.
That's about as good as it gets when you get out of line pre-flop with 9-7 suited. I check it over to Mike, and he decides to continue betting for $6,500. Of course, I've got an amazing hand and probably in decent shape, even if he's got a hand like aces. But I don't think there's any chance he's going to fold, given that he's c-betting on this board and he put in all that money pre-flop. He's probably got something good. So I don't think re-raising has much purpose. Probably better to just call and try to get there. That's what I do, and sure enough, we get there right away. It's the deuce of spades. This is the stuff dreams are made of. Playing poorly pre-flop and getting rewarded post-flop. It's a special feeling about that, for sure. This time I decide to lead out for $14,000, thinking to myself that Mike's likely going to check back a hand like ace-king, or even a set sometimes. I suspect if he's got an ace with a spade alongside it, he'll probably still check that back as well, so I don't want him to check it back. I lead out for $14,000. Now it's on Mike, and I certainly don't envy his spot with ace-king without a spade. I think calling is probably okay, but he decides to just get the pain over with and jam all in. Unfortunately for Mike, I was not bluffing this time. I turned a very lucky flush. I call right away. He wants to run it twice. It turns out it makes no difference, as my man Mike does not have a spade in this instance. We end up winning this $133,000 pot. And more importantly, we earn ourselves one of those yellow buttons, meaning we do not have to pay that penalty. Nice pot going our way, and we're off to a good start tonight. In this next one, the straddle is on yet again. We're essentially playing 25-50, 100, 200 for most of the night. I raised it up with 8-4 of diamonds to $500. Don't really have a good excuse for this, and get called by Brown Balla on my left and Mike X in the big blind. So 3 ways to a flop, which comes king 10-5, 2 diamonds. I've got myself a flush draw and 8 high. Seems like a good spot to continue betting, so that's what I do. I put in $500, and only Brown Balla calls on my left. Turn card is the jack of clubs. Now it's on me again, and we can check and try to make a flush on the river if he checks back. That's kind of the passive approach, or continue betting and hope he folds a better hand. Considering he called a small bet on the flop, I think he could have hands like 10-9 suited, 10-8 suited, maybe 5-4 suited, all these sort of middle strength pairs that are probably going to fold to a turn bet. Of course, he could certainly have a king, but we'll have to cross that bridge once we get to it. I continue betting for $3,500. We'll also be doing this with a fair amount of strong hands, I think, so it doesn't seem terrible. Brown Balla is undeterred, though. He makes the call as he's got himself top pair and an open-ender, but unfortunately, I get lucky once more. It's the jack of diamonds on the river giving me a flush. Pot's around $10,000. I decide to put in one more bet, this time for value, of course. Bet around half pot. $5K into the middle. Brown Balla does not love it, but in the end, he does make the call, and we're going to win this one as well. Things are going swimmingly for me here, but that's about to come to a screeching halt. In this hand, Henry opens to 300. Clue makes it 1,000 with aces, and I've got pocket jacks in the small blind. A little bit dicey, facing a raise and a re-raise already, but jacks are often going to be ahead despite all that aggression. So I raise it up to 3,500. Henry folds, but Clue does not. He makes the call. Of course, he could be doing this with pocket pairs bigger than mine, but more often than not, I suspect I still have the best hand. So when the board comes 7-3-3, I'm happy to keep betting. This time I put in $4,000, and Clue makes the call. Looking for a clean turn card, and that's exactly what we get. It's an absolute brick. The deuce of clubs. My man's got himself $21,000 behind, which is a slight overbet if I were to go all in. And I think if I had hands like ace-5 suited, ace-4 suited, perhaps a hand like king-jack or queen-10 suited, you know, these sort of like pre-flop bluffs, I would probably want to be ripping them all in here in hopes of getting folds from medium strength pocket pairs and, of course, ace-highs. So I think with jacks, it's okay to also do that. That being said, I do also think there's merit to checking. It opens the door for Clue to bluff with hands that float the flop, like, for example, queen-jack suited or 10-9 suited, you know, these sorts of backdoor possible hands that he might get curious on the flop with. But I think it's more likely that Clue's got a hand like pocket 10s, pocket 9s, maybe ace-king, maybe even 8-7 suited, all these sorts of hands that could talk themselves into a call. He's seen enough of my work to know that I bluff at least sometimes. So I decide to go all in, hoping to get called but not snap called. And that's exactly what happens in this instance. Clue has played his pocket aces to perfection, laying the trap, and of course the board comes perfect for him to get the absolute max. We run it twice. Sadly for me, there is no jack on either run out, and we lose a $60,000 pot. Things were going so well, and this puts a screeching halt to that. But that's okay, the night is young, plenty of hands to come. And by plenty of hands, I mean Queen 3 offsuit. Not even joking. In this one, I am in the $200 straddle. Action gets to Mike X in the small blind. He raises it to 600. Then Clue re-raises to 2,000, and I've got a very strong hand, a queen and a 3 with 2 different suits. Could flop all kinds of stuff, so I raise it up to $5,500 to go. Jokes aside, Mike X and Clue are 2 guys that play in my private game on Saturdays. We have quite a history, and I definitely like to gamble it up against these particular opponents. This is certainly not something I recommend, and not something I would do against many other players at Hustler Casino Live. But like I said, Clue and Mike, those are guys that I want to have some fun with at the poker table. So I make it $5,500 to go. Mike X folds, Clue does not. We go heads up to a flop of ace 5-4 with 2 hearts. Not ideal because after he re-raises Mike and calls my own raise, he's likely got a hand like ace jack, ace queen, maybe even ace king. And of course, he's not going to fold those for a continuation bet. But I put in a small bet. Maybe he'll fold hands like pocket 10s or pocket 9s that he could play the same way pre-flop. Sadly for me, he makes the call, which in my mind confirms that he's got an ace. So when the turn comes the king of hearts, I could continue to keep bluffing, but I don't think he's going to fold top pair, even if I continue applying pressure. So I decided to just check it back. Who knows, maybe we'll hit a deuce on the river for a straight. And what do you know? That's exactly what happens. The deuce of clubs. Are you kidding me? I am so undeserving of this. I get out of line pre-flop with queen 3 against ace queen and somehow end up beating my opponent with a straight versus top pair. Clue checks again. I will be doing no such thing. I put in a bet of $8,400, right around half pot. My opponent does not seem to love it, but what can you do, right? You've got ace queen on a board like this. It's time to make the call, and he agrees. He tosses in the money. I am not embarrassed at all about turning this one over. In fact, I think it's quite a lot of fun to play trash pre-flop and make a hand post-flop against opponents that you battle with on a regular basis. That's what's happening this time. I win a $34,000 pot with queen 3. Not recommended. Do not try this at home. And yeah, this is not my proudest moment, but it's part of the story. Later on, I decide to play a real hand, pocket jacks. Mike opens it up to 300. I make it 1,000 on the button. When it gets back to him, he says that's not enough and kicks it up to $3,500. I make the call and we go to a flop of queen 7-6 rainbow. Mike continues for a small bet of 2,400. I've got jacks, can't go anywhere just yet, despite a queen being out there, and my opponent still possibly having aces or kings. So I make the call and we see the 4 of clubs on the turn. A little bit dicey now if he continues betting, and sure enough he does for around half pot, 6,500. This is a very good bet, at least in my opinion. Now it's kind of close with pocket jacks. We could have some better hands like aces, kings, ace queen, queen jack suited, pocket 7s, pocket 6s, all sorts of stuff that would be stronger than jacks. And we also have some removal to bluffs you might have like ace jack suited or jack 10 suited. So I think it's a pretty easy fold, but sadly, now that I'm watching the tape, looks like I got bluffed by Mike X and his ace king. This one hurts. Nice play, Mike. Nice play. In this next one, I decide to get ace king myself. There's a raise from suited Superman. Shout out to him. He just won a tournament for like 300 or 400K. He doesn't care about $300, so I raise it up to 1,500 from the small blind with ace king suited. Superman makes the call, and we go out of position to a great flop of ace 7-3 with 1 club. So a dry board, we've got top pair, top kicker. I continue with a small bet, just like I would with all my hands, and he makes the call. Seems like a good situation, and even better when the turn comes the 5 of clubs, giving me the nut flush draw to go along with my top pair. Now we have a question between betting or checking, and I think both are completely fine, actually. But considering that Superman, I think, could be floating the flop with hands that try to bluff later on, I decide to feed him some rope being out of position. I check it. He does not check. Instead, he puts in $3,000. As you guys can see, this is what you call an action turn card because it has given him 2 pair and me top pair with the nut flush draw. Now it's back on me, and facing this $3,000 bet, I don't really see the point in raising, so I just make the call. Perhaps we need some help on the river. Perhaps we don't. Of course, it's hard for me to know in the moment. Queen of Diamonds, not my favorite card because now we lose to Ace Queen, which was a possibility, I guess, on the turn. I check it again. Superman does not. He puts in a bet of $9,000. Kind of close. I'm not loving it. We lose to 2-pair sets, possible straights like 6-4 suited or maybe even 4 deuce suited if Superman is that ballsy. But of course, we are still beating hands like 9-8 suited or maybe a 5 that tries to turn itself into a bluff. I'm not sure. Suited Superman, I've seen him bluff quite a bit. I don't know what hands he could be trying to steal the pot with, but what I do know is I have top pair with a king kicker. It's a pretty good bluff catcher, so that's what I do. I put in the call. Unfortunately, I got the bad news. He's got 2 pair. I can't beat it. Nice hand, brother. And with that, we move to what I think is the most interesting hand of the night. In this one, the straddle is on yet again. There's 3 limpers before I look down at pocket 8s on the button. Suspect it's the best hand, so I make it 1,400 to go. And now Jungle Man takes his time in the big blind before making it 5,400. Quite a big raise. Gets back to me. I've got a decent pocket pair in position. We're deep. I'm not going anywhere just yet. I make the call. We go to a flop of 9-3 deuce with 2 diamonds. Not bad for pocket 8s. Could still be ahead of all sorts of hands, like the one he's got in this case. He continues for $5,000, and I make the call. Turn card looks good to me. It's the 3 of hearts pairing the middle card. Jungle Man thinks for a bit and checks. Now it's on me, and I think you can make a case for both checking back or betting. But I definitely prefer betting for, well, a few different, very technical and nerdy reasons that I don't want to bore you guys with. Otherwise, this video would be like 45 minutes long. But long story short, I think a small bet is better than a check. So that's what I do. I put in $8,000. Now it's back on Jungle Man, and this is where the hand gets spicy as my man decides to go for a check raise up to $26,500. Back to me with pocket 8s, and this of course is one of the downsides of betting small with marginal hands against players who are capable of applying max pressure. You can get yourself into these dicey situations. I did think maybe this turn check raise was a possibility, and sure enough, here we are. Back to me, and what do you do with 8s in this spot without a diamond? I think it's a little bit close, but considering that Jungle Man is capable of having many bluffs, and I don't know how often he would go for a check raise with an overpair, I think it's still the best decision to continue in this hand. We're also getting a good price. Pot's like 56K, and I've only got to call like 18,000. So I think for a bit and make the call. Definitely not loving this situation, but like I said, can't go anywhere just yet, I think. I toss in the money, pot's around 74,000, and we see the Queen of Clubs on the river. Not my favorite card because if he was check raising some flush draws on the turn, they could improve to top pair. For example, King Queen of Diamonds, Queen Jack of Diamonds. You get the idea. Now it's back on Jungle Man. He's got around 57,000 remaining in his stack. And I've already made up my mind that if he shoves all in, I am probably just going to snap fold. I have one of the worst hands I could ever have in this situation. Well, not the absolute worst, but definitely not good enough to call. Could have some better hands, and his all-in on the river would be quite a big bet. However, fortunately for me, after thinking it over for around a minute, Jungle Man decides to check, and I am more than happy to check it back with my pocket 8s. He announces Ace-King, and just like that, we are going to win a nearly $75,000 pot against an absolute legend of the game, Jungle Man. This was a memorable hand for me because the last time I ever played with Jungle was at a 5-5 meetup game 4 years ago at the Bicycle Casino. In fact, here is a photo in case you guys are interested. So to go from playing 5-5 with him to battling at a 50, 100, 200 game, it's quite meaningful to me. And of course, it was nice to run hot and win this flip against him. Until next time, Jungle Man. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the last hand of this stream. I raise it up to 500. Once again, the straddle is on. Brown Bala calls on my left, and two other players call as well. I've got King 10 of hearts, and we get a great flop. It's Jack 10-4 with two hearts, giving me middle pair and a flush draw. Pretty sweet. Action checks to me, and despite me having a great hand, I don't really see the point in betting middle pair. probably only going to get called by a jack, which doesn't have us in great shape. So I decide to check. Brown baller checks back, and we go to a turn, which is amazing. It's the 10 of diamonds, giving me a somewhat disguised 3 of a kind. Superman decides to bet now for $700. Gets to me, and even though I have a super strong hand, I think it's better to just call and keep all his options open. Plus, if I'm always raising with strong hands and calling with weak hands, it gets pretty easy to play against me. So I decide to call. Brown baller calls as well. As you guys can see, he's got a better flush draw. So even though I don't know it in the moment, we do not want a heart on the river. And that's exactly what we avoid. It's the deuce of clubs, a great card. Suited Superman now checks, and I decide to bet the size of the pot. I'm hoping this will look either like a stone cold bluff or a very strong hand. That's why I bet the size of the pot. Bluffs include king queen, queen 9 suited, maybe 9-8 suited. Strong hands, of course, include full houses, 3 of a kind, and such. Interestingly enough, brown baller now raises to $15,000. Suited Superman lets go of his pocket sevens, and now it's back on me. Yeah, I have a great hand, but what do we even beat in this instance? I can't really think of a hand that he's turning into a bluff, but at the same time, I can't think of a hand that has me beat. Maybe Jack 10, but would he really check back 2 pair on the flop? I don't know. This one didn't make a lot of sense to me, so yeah, I took my time to make the call, but in the end, that's exactly what I do. If he's got it, sort of thing. And he does not got it. Instead, he's turning bottom pair into a bluff. That's no good. I've got 3 of a kind, and we end up winning this $34,000 pot to end the night. All right, so all things considered, that went pretty well for me. I ended up winning $90,000, I think it was. And yeah, I'm quite happy with how tonight went. I feel like I played pretty well, at least for my own expectations. Certainly ran well, of course. Can't win 100K without running good. And didn't encounter like too many tough situations. So yeah, overall, a very good night at Hustler Casino Live. As always, thank you guys for watching, and don't forget about that 2550 coming up this Sunday at Resorts World. If you guys want to play, like I said, hit me up on Instagram or send me an email. And if you can, include something in the subject line or in the message that says Resorts World. That way it's easier for me to find your message. Until next time, good luck at your local tables. Peace.